Hi everyone, this is Tim Belcher and welcome back to the channel. This is a real deal no-stitch leather clutch. It's just big enough for a large smartphone and a credit card wallet, and this design can be cut on any laser, cut with a Cricut, or even cut by hand. And this is how I made it. In this series of no-stitch projects, you've seen me make a series of various size handbags, both on a laser as well as the Cricut Maker. Well, this one is a new ground-up design for a small clutch, and this pattern is small enough to be made on any laser or the Cricut. And in a previous episode, I went over my technique for dyeing leather, so I'm going to start this project with my leather already dyed. For this build, I'm going to use my laser, but again, easily done on a Cricut. Just see my last video on the Cricut made leather purse for more details. What you see me doing here is applying leather balm to my panels. Leather balm is essentially a wax-based protective product. Now I'm showing you this for a few reasons. Number one is just to see the difference a top coat makes on leather itself after dyeing. But second, putting a top coat on this leather now is really important for the laser, and I'll get to that point in a minute. Okay, all my leather is prepped and I'm ready to cut the patterns out, so I jump into light burn and I'm gonna pull in the front panel SVG for 4-ounce leather, the thickness I'm using here. And I'm gonna then pull in my artwork for etching. On a Cricut, you would use the pen for this. And again, I cover how to make this type of background art in my last video. I'll center them, do the etch first, and then the cut. And as you can see, I use a series of magnets to put my leather on the bed before I make the cut. And here's the first time that top coat comes in handy. You can see in these before pics that there's a lot of residue on the leather after engraving. And on raw leather, that can actually lead to a little bit of staining. But with the top coat applied first, we just need to use a clean, damp cloth to completely clean it up. And you can see how much of a difference it makes with these aftershots. I've also cleaned up my little wristlets, and while they're out, I'll go ahead and put some hardware on them. I start by putting a rivet on, enclosing a lobster clasp, and then putting the top of the rivet on. And I'll use this small rivet setter and this small anvil to set each side. Designs for this wristlet are also in the pattern pack, as well as a design for a simple straight leather band. Now you may have noticed that the engraving is sort of a light brown on brown for this panel actually. And let's make that a little bit easier to read, and for that I'm going to use this antiquing gel. And this is basically, as far as I can tell, a shoe polish. But I'm going to dab and press on a fairly heavy coat. And you'll notice that I have several sheets of paper under the clutch at this point. I'm going to take great care to apply this antique without letting that leather move around. I don't want the leather to move over any that's on the paper and create a stain on the back. And every time I need to move a piece, I'm going to make sure to flip or change the paper out as well. And now this is the second time pre-finishing these panels helps. I can now wipe off the antique with a clean, damp rag, and the gel will stay in the engraved areas, really darkening those engravings. Here it is now after that antiquing process. Now this clutch is designed for this particular clasp I'm using. Links will be included, but with this type of locking clasp, the lock portion is most typically used with a liner. You'll see what I mean in a minute. So I simply cut a 2-inch square of the same leather. I actually put my logo onto mine. And I'm simply going to take an awl and scratch around the back of the leather where I want to cover that lock. The clasp has these 2 prongs that push through slits cut in the front panel and go through this metal backing plate, and then both prongs are bent over to keep the lock in place. Now I'm going to take some barge rubber contact cement and I'm going to carefully coat the back of that 2-inch square. I say carefully because I don't want any of this adhesive to touch the face of any panel of leather. And then I'm going to carefully color inside the lines of the back of the front panel, just taking my time and making sure that it's neat and it's up to the line. I can then set that aside to dry for 10 minutes or so while I put the hardware on the back panel. And this part of the clasp is fairly simple. I'll remove the screws and simply make sure the side with the locking grooves is on the front, and then reassemble it on the back panel. Obviously you could redesign this for other hardware, but I designed mine for use with this specific clasp because I like the quality of it. I find it's really easy on Amazon to buy cheap hardware, much harder to find stuff that is of good quality and that you like to use. And the rubber cements had time to dry, so I'll simply press on my 2-inch liner over the locking clasp backer, and this will keep that clasp from scratching anything inside the bag. And we designed this on a computer and we cut it with a robot, so we're pretty sure it's going to fit well together. As you've seen with some of the other purse designs, I'm going to take a small rivet and set a D-ring on each side of the front panel while it's still flat and easy to do so. I'll then set the second rivet on each side of the back panel once we've assembled it. And speaking of assembly, it's now time to get started. Hopefully you've seen this covered in more detail in the previous videos for this series. The triangle ends of the tabs are started at an angle to fit through the slots and are then seated with sort of a twist. And I'm going to use a small set of pliers to help me grab these small tabs and seat them. And I do spray the inside with some water to help me form the bag as I assemble it. And I've covered this part in a lot more detail in other videos. Once I'm done with the tabs and slots, I'll spray the inside of the flap with water so that when it dries, it'll remember that folded shape. I'll now set those 2 final rivets on the remaining loops through those existing D-rings, which is fairly straightforward. And we have a completed clutch. Now I'm going to use a bit more leather balm, covering everything including the sides, to give everything a bit more protection and a bit more shine. And while I'm at it, I'll also do the straps and give everything a good polish with a nice clean rag. I named my previous set of full purses the San Francisco, and I think we're going to name this the Key West Clutch. That's a name my wife came up with, thinking it was a small bag, needed a small town name. And I think this project is a great first leather project. Super simple, just 2 pieces of leather that are held together with math. And I've included 3 patterns for anywhere between 3 and 6 ounce leather, or 1.5 to 2.5 millimeter thick material. I hope you like this and give this project a try. And as always, there's more designs coming, so hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching.